The Financial Survival Network, helping you survive and thrive in the new economy. For a free financial survival toolkit and newsletter, sign up at kerrylutz.com, KERRYLUTZ.com.
1490 WGCH. This is Kerry Lutz. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network. My next guest, frequent contributor to the show, John Rubino of dollarcollapse.com. John, great to have you back.
Hey, Kerry. Great to be back.
Yeah, we're living through interesting times, aren't we?
Oh, my God. Yeah. It's as we talked about before we started recording here, it's hard to get enough sleep because so much wild stuff happens during the night here that, if you're a finance geek, you want to pay attention to it. And so you've got the Asian markets and the European markets, and then the U.S. stock market opens early in the morning. So the only time to sleep is Sunday anymore.
Yeah, well, could you imagine if somebody was doing a timeline of this whole disaster, this whole collapse, and they started in roughly 2007, 2008, and they tracked each event? It would run for thousands of pages because so much has happened in so relatively a short time. And we like, we like to convince ourselves that we're really what's happening now is stable, and what's happening in the future might be, and what happened in the past wasn't stable. But we like to convince ourselves that we're in a time of stability, and nothing could be further from the truth here, could it?
Yeah, well, to a human mind, this feels kind of stable, when you look around you, because we don't perceive time the way, say, historians are going to perceive it later. When they write the history of this decade, they're going to say, well, we collapsed in 2000, and they're going to date all the stuff that happened after that as part of the collapse. But to us, it feels like kind of an up and down process, where maybe we get it together, and then things start to go up and get better for a little while, and then they fall apart again. But we're really in a collapse right now. The global system of financial dominance and the military-industrial complex and cradle-to-grave welfare states and fiat currencies. This is all falling apart, and it's all going to be swept away. And in 10 years or so, or 5 years, when it all completely collapses, we're going to have to sit down and figure out what to rebuild from the rubble. But right now, we're in the process of the collapse of this system that we've come to think of as normal reality, but in reality is actually an aberration.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like when you watch them blow up one of those buildings, and they push the plunger down or they push the button, and all of a sudden you hear and you see and you feel all these explosions, and you see the burst of light, and then they stop, and then for a second the building is still standing, and then in slow motion it just implodes. It collapses, and that's kind of what it's like now. We're watching all this in slow motion, but with the hindsight of history, it'll look like it happened in no time at all. And it's really an amazing thing to see, because you know that these banks are holding on by their fingernails on the ledge, and it's just a matter of time till something happens and the fingernails give way and they're gone.
Yeah, and we could be very close to that point in Europe, at least, because we're seeing Greece basically begin to implode now, because they don't seem to be able to pass the kinds of cuts in public sector spending that the rest of Europe is demanding of them. And so it looks like the government is getting ready to fall, and whoever comes next may or may not be open to these kinds of cuts. And at some point, people are going to realize that no matter what happens, Greece can't stay within the same kind of a monetary regime that Germany's comfortable with. And so they're going to have to leave the Eurozone. And that's going to throw the system into chaos, because that kind of fear that if Greece can leave, who else can leave? It's going to spread to Italy and Spain, and we'll see governments fall and possibly some kind of dictatorship take over in some of these countries. Greece is, as you said before we started recording, has a history of military coups. And traditionally, historically, in times of extreme financial crises, people look for strong leadership and are less worried about civil liberties than about stopping the chaos. And so, Europe could be on the verge of something like that, where we see civil liberties get pushed aside for a while, and governments come in that are just concerned with saving the financial system from collapse and not having to throw millions of public sector workers out of work. And so chaos, in other words, is coming to Europe very possibly. Yeah. And without a doubt, it'll spread to the U.S. when it happens, because we're teetering on the brink as it is. It's just that we're not immediately falling over the cliff the way Europe might be. And but let them fall, then our banking system, which is inextricably intertwined with the European banks, will also be pulled down, and then who knows? Then it's chaos here.
Yeah, it's hallelujah time, as they say. But the system is just so fragile, and it's one black swan away from just collapsing in on itself, and that's got to mean a period of chaos, whether it's financial chaos. Hopefully, I always envisioned a thing where there was no money was going to work except gold and silver, and then one day it dawned on me, all these digital dollars will cease to exist, but the actual green stuff, the currency, for a while will have value, and people will use it for no other reason that they don't have anything else to trade with. And then you'll see a massive deflation from it, and you'll have gold and silver and barter and I guess real estate, but it's kind of hard to trade that, illiquid, and you'll see actual currency reclaiming its place in the monetary system, where it's kind of outside of the gray market, the black market. Cash really isn't king anymore. It kind of is just an afterthought a lot of times,
Yeah, right now money is electronic. It's just bits in a computer system. But whether cash holds its value or not kind of depends on what the government is doing with the printing press, the physical printing press, when everything falls apart. Because if cash becomes more valuable, actual physical paper cash, then there's nothing really stopping these guys from just cranking it up and running off as many paper $100 bills as it takes to pay their own expenses. And who knows? I think that when the craziness really comes, the gold and silver are clearly going to be the currencies of choice. But like you said, most people don't have very much gold and silver, or any gold and silver.
Right.
And so we're going to be left at some point without any widely circulated medium of exchange. And traditionally that's happened a lot of times in history, and everybody falls back on gold and silver.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know about the dollar now. But anyhow, the important thing to understand about all this is that it's not really that complicated. You borrow too much money, your life changes in unpleasant ways for a country as well as for an individual. And we, in the developed world, have just borrowed too much money. So now we have a period of chaos. Just like if you borrowed $1 million on your credit cards this year and your interest rate jumped up to 29%, your life would be chaotic for a while. And
so would my wife. So would my wife.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, your life and your wife would be chaotic. And we're that way. That's what happened to the U.S. and Europe and Japan. And so in that sense, it's not really that hard to understand. But the trick is figuring out exactly what form the chaos takes. Because will it be a deflationary crash where all of this debt just gets wiped out via default, like the 1930s, or are we going to try to run the printing presses, electronically speaking, and just flood the system with meaningless fiat currencies in an effort to make these debts less valuable because we're paying them off with depreciated currency? And will we spiral into some kind of Weimar Germany hyperinflation? And at this point, we don't know which one of those is going to come, because we've never been here before. We've never had this much debt that has to be wiped out, this much bad debt especially, and we've never had all the major governments of the world with unlimited printing presses. So we're in a historically very interesting time, and the people that analyze this decade in the future are going to have a ball with it. But for us, it's more problematic because we have to live through it, and for most people, it's going to be really, really unpleasant.
Yeah, we don't even want to picture it, but it's kind of it's kind of like the survival mechanism of the race and of individuals will kick in, and you're going to see some things that are really bad because people will do what they have to survive, and you'll see things that people really pitch in together, and the lack of community, the lack of sense of community that we've all encountered over the past few decades, I think will dramatically change, because we're really going to have to rely upon each other to protect each other and to get food and whatever else, because you can definitely envision a situation where the food supply kind of for a while basically breaks down in the distribution system, because right now everybody's getting paid. That's what keeps the system working. But when they're not getting paid, is the cop going to show up at work? Is the truck driver going to drive his goods across the country? And if he tries to, will he be able to get gasoline, or diesel? Those are all the issues that I think we're going to be confronted with once this crash really goes through its final stage, which probably isn't that much longer to go, but you never know.
Yeah, for an individual, this macro stuff is interesting from an intellectual point of view. What's the catalyst that wipes out the system, and how did we get here? But the really important thought process is, how do you prepare yourself and your family for what will obviously be hard times? Maybe we can't exactly define the specifics of the hard times that are coming, but they're going to be hard. Oh, yeah. And so what do you do as an individual? And, the obvious things are load up on precious metals in several different forms and places. And like you said, take some steps for food security and stuff like that, because there's no guarantee that the global agricultural supply lines will be disrupted, and it's going to be very hard to get food. But in past instances of hyperinflations and deflationary crashes, it has been hard to get the basic necessities for whatever reason. And so having some food on hand, and maybe a generator, and the other things that are supplied now by the big complex systems that are out there that could be disrupted, is probably a good idea just from a peace of mind standpoint. You just want to be as self-sufficient as possible in a world where the society, quote unquote, may not be able to take care of you the way it has in the past. Mm-hmm. And so, preparation, or the preppers, is a term that you're seeing a lot out there, because a lot of people are starting to think that way. They're starting to think that maybe they better be able to take care of themselves and their families. And there's no guarantee that it gets to that point, but it's probably a good idea to be safe rather than sorry, and just start becoming as self-sufficient as possible. Have a garden. That's a nice, peaceful thing to do in any event.
Yeah.
And it might be life-saving at some point.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. But stocking up on a couple $1,000s of extra food, which can get you through a couple of months, which is probably because we can't afford to have a systemic breakdown for too long. I mean, it just can't happen. So will they intercede prior to that and come up with some revaluation of all the currencies and a global currency? That's what Martin Armstrong seems to believe is going to occur, and Jim Sinclair as well. But something's going to happen, and it ain't going to be good, but it's going to be designed to at least keep the thing going and keep us in survival mode. And on that lovely note, John, tell us where we find you on the internet and about dollarcollapse.com.
Yeah, okay. I run a website, like you said, dollarcollapse.com. It's www.dollarcollapse.com. And it's basically a news aggregation site / blog, where I post some thoughts on what we talked about today, and then links to the articles that I would read if I had all the time that I wish I did. And so it's designed to be a place where you can show up for an hour in the morning or an hour in the evening and kind of get caught up on the dark side of what's going on out there. All the potential problems and all the immediate things that are happening that look scary from a financial and lifestyle point of view.
Hey, well, sounds great, and we will have you on again in another month and see where the collapse is and what the status is at that point, and have a great day.